Hey, I'm Andy Aledort. In this edition of In Deep, I'd like to talk about playing over two-chord vamps. There's all kinds of songs. I always think of Feeling All Right by Traffic or Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. I mean, there's a zillion of them. Even parts of Dock of the Bay. Tennessee Whiskey is a good one. I'd Rather Go Blind. Songs that just go back and forth between two chords. And as a guitar player, one of the challenges is to come up with chord voicings and connect the two chords in the vamp, in the two-chord vamp, and then work solos, weave solos in and out of the rhythm part. This is especially true if you're in a one-guitar band or accompanying yourself, where you need to do it all on one guitar. So what I'm going to do is we're going to be in the key of E, and just sort of like a typical E dominant, E7 blues, where we're going to go from the one chord E to the four chord A. And we're going to talk about if you're doing that in one position using what's known as close voicing, where you're only moving a couple fingers, staying in the same position, how to develop solo lines in the same position so you don't have to move, but call on your creativity to come up with a variety of ways to augment that rhythm part. And then as we progress through this series of lessons, we're going to move those voicings to different places of the neck and do the same thing, solo in those specific places. This is a great way to work on your knowledge of notes, your knowledge of scales, your knowledge of chord voicings, ways to connect chords, and in a focused way and a systematic way, work on voicings all over the fretboard. All right, so what I've got here is a voicing of E7 in fifth position. It's a cool voicing. The root note is on the B string. So the lowest note is the major third, and that's why you would call it a first inversion chord. First inversion means the third is in the bass. And we have G sharp, the major third of E, D, the flat 7. There's our root note, and our B, the fifth on top. You might know this voicing from Creedence Clearwater. And that's the one chord. We're in the key of E. So in going to the four chord, I want to stay in this position and keep as many of the notes as I can. So I can keep the B on top and the E here, and I'm just going to lower the D to C sharp and the G sharp to G natural. So now we have A9 instead of A7. Because it's handy. We have that B note on top. Might as well keep it for a more interesting chord instead of just A7. And then the strum, it's based on 16th notes. 1, 2, 3. And I just thought of another two-chord song just like that, Season of the Witch. Donovan, also done Super Session, Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper. And there's a little bit of staccato happening where the chords are struck very briefly. You don't let them ring, except for the last hit in each bar. Now, before we get into soloing in this position, the systematic approach that I'm proposing here is to take E7 to A7 and move it to all the different places on the neck. So let's do that first, just to show you what I'm talking about. You know, guitar players all the time will say, well, you know, when I play rhythm, I don't have that many ideas. I just feel like I know one way to do something, or maybe two ways to do something. So as a means of learning your chord voicings and two chord vamps, so it's two chord voicings and the way they connect, you just take this idea of going from E7 to A7, and for now, we're going to stay on the top four strings and move it to different positions of the neck. So this is fifth position. The next one, we're going to go down to second position. So if you chose to play in this position, here's the E7 here. So our E root note's on the D string, B the fifth, D the flat seven, G sharp the third, major third. So again, we're keeping the notes that we can keep. Aren't too many that we can keep. We can keep the E note, and then the other three go down. If you wanted to play A9 like we had done, you know, when we were here, we had, and the B note was a constant between the two voicings, you could keep the B note here, and then it would be this, which is a nice sounding chord. It's not the most obvious A dominant sound. So that's your choice if you want to go. But anyhow, the idea is when you get to soloing, the licks would be played over here. All right, now let's move higher on the board. All right, so here we have our E7 over here. So our E note is on the G string. So you'll notice it's been moving, you know, because we're changing our voicings. First one, E, the note that tells us the name of the chord was on the B string. When we went here, the note that tells us the name of the chord is on the D string. Get up here, the note that tells us the name, the E note, is on the G string. And then when I go to A7, I can go. So here's my A7. And the other thing that's happening is we're using this voicing. So it's the second inversion, fifth in the bass, to root position A when we're up here, E7, A7. But they were reversed in the one we just came from. So this shape, where the root note's on the D string, we used here. And then this was, so that in and of itself is useful to think of E7 to A7, E7, A7, the voicings are reversed. Okay, here's another example. All right, so here, this is kind of a cool voicing of E9. It's really like E add 9, because we have Now our root note is on the high E string. So keep in mind, we've been moving that root note around as we move up and down the board. So what's cool about this is we have our flat 7 on the bottom, third inversion. Remember, first inversion is third in the bass, second inversion is fifth in the bass, third inversion, seventh in the bass, flat 7. So we have the flat 7 and the 9. So the chord has more character than a typical dominant chord right away. And then you also have what's known as a cluster, because F sharp and G sharp, the ninth or second, and the major third, are whole steps apart. So it's an interesting sound there too. And then the top part you could call a spread voicing, because the notes are far away from each other. This is a famous chord. It's known as the Hideaway chord, because Freddie King in the song Hideaway he used this great chord. So what I decided to do was to keep the second from my A chord, so it really turns into like an A6 chord instead of A7 like that. Just a way to get a little bit of a different flavor. I could have gone and then, but it's nice to have a common tone. Just that one note staying there, has a big difference makes a big difference in the character of the sound. A little jazzier sounding. Okay, one more example of these voicings. Another great example of a 2-chord vamp like this, going between 2 dominant chords, the 1 chord and the 4 chord, is Turn On Your Love Light, Solomon Burke, also done by the Grateful Dead, and many other people. But there's a zillion songs that have that 2-chord thing. So now, let's go back to our first position, 5th position, and I'm going to talk about ways in which to add single note riffs interweaved into the rhythm part. And what we're going to use is, we're going to use the BB box, named after blues guitar player B.B. King. The BB box, it's sort of a scale, it's based on a couple of different scales. There are different incarnations of the BB box. So it's a fun thing to explore. I think it's an essential thing for guitar players to know, whether you're a blues guitar player, jazz, country, whatever. There's a lot available to you there in the BB box. So let me show you what I mean. All right, so here's the BB box in what I'm going to call 4th, 5th position, because it starts in 4th, and then it goes to 5th. So when we're playing rhythm here, the idea is you're gonna just use those notes in different little variations of what falls under the categorization of BB box, between the chords, interweaved in there. Let me show you. All right, so I was using a lot of hammers and pulls. But as you can see, I don't have to move. I can go. And stay right there. And the cool thing is to restrict yourself to a position like this and then do your best to be creative and melodic and stay in time. So you're actually practicing a lot of different things. You're practicing improvisation against a beat, which is what happens when you play in a band. So if you keep that rhythm going and stay within the grid of the time, you got to get your licks in there before you get back to your next chord. Here's some more examples. So right there I had my A9 chord, ring for the first two beats, 1, 2, and then 3, 4 is where my riff is going to come in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And this is a real Albert King. And we're using that C to C sharp as a passing tone. In the first lick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. We came in with the lick right on B2 in the bar of A9. 1, 2. So that's another choice, where to come in. All right, in that example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, and so the lick's going to come in on the upbeat of 2. 1 and 2. But the tricky part is at the end of the lick to go back to my open low E. Like that, so I get back on my rhythm part. You could hold over sort of finish the lick. That's another way to do it. All right, here's another example. All right, so that time the A9 held for 2 beats. 1, 2. And I did an Albert King 2-step bend. So that's also a nice thing to practice. Getting that 2-step bend quickly. The second time, after finishing the lick, so the single note rolls into the next bar. So I went just to mix it up a little. All right, so there I put a whole step in and then walk down chromatically. kind of between a B.B. King lick and an Albert King lick, and you hear Stevie Ray Vaughan use licks like that all the time. All right, so I encourage you to work on this little rhythm part in this position and come up with as many variables that you possibly can, just mixing those notes around, changing them up. It doesn't have to be complicated, but variety, that's a thing, while staying within the grid of the beat.